This story happened 5 years ago, but it still freaks me out. I'm a long-haul truck driver. I've been doing it for most of my adult life. I love the freedom it provides, out on the open road, not stuck behind a desk wearing a suit and tie. I would hate that. I prefer being by myself and getting to travel to new places. Anyway, on the night this incident took place, I had just stopped for the night across from a little diner right outside of middle of nowhere, Nevada. I figured I would grab a bite to eat before getting some sleep for the night. The diner was pretty empty, except for a guy leaning over what looked like a cup of coffee in the far corner, and a young couple in one of the booths. I grabbed a seat at the counter, setting my hat down in front of me. An older woman with permed red hair and thick Coke bottle glasses approached me from behind the counter. She was holding a pot of coffee in one hand, while the other hand was resting on her hip in an "I'm too old and too tired to be doing this" expression. "What can I get you?" she asked in a very unenthusiastic tone. "I'll take a club sandwich, please, and a water." The overworked and underpaid waitress nodded and then headed over to the couple in the booth. The young woman was laughing her head off at something the guy had said. I turned my attention to the small TV with the antennae situated on top like a pair of rabbit ears. It was late night news, and the reporter was covering a story most people had probably already read about online a few hours ago. Something about a missing prisoner. Yikes. I had never thought much about the dangers of sleeping on the road until that very moment. I mean, I always locked my doors and tried to park in a well-lit area, if there was one, but other than that, I had never really considered the inherent risks of sleeping in usually sketchy areas with just my flashlight for protection. I know truck drivers are usually considered big, burly, intimidating men, but I'm a normal height, average build guy just looking to do my job. I picked up one of the little creamer cups out of the dish on the counter and started rolling it over in my fingers. The handsome reporter on the TV had handed things off to the even better looking blonde woman, giving the winning lottery numbers. The door to the kitchen swung open, and the waitress emerged with my food and drink balanced on one of those circular black trays. Thank God, I was starving. I hadn't eaten since early that morning, and that was just half of a Pop-Tart. "Thank you," I said as she set the plate in front of me. "Aha," she muttered as she disappeared back into the kitchen. I had just taken a bite out of my sandwich when the lights overhead started to flicker. There was a faint buzzing noise that went along with it, like an overloaded wire. Well, that wasn't too surprising. This diner looked like it hadn't been upgraded since the 50s, with the ripped upholstery in most of the seats and the faded blue paint on the walls. It wouldn't be surprising to learn that this building's electricity still ran off vacuum tubes. I continued eating, not caring why the lights continued their occasional strobing. I had begun to pull out the small, thin book of crosswords I carried around in the front pocket of my denim jacket when I heard the sound of the door opening and closing behind me. Two large men dressed in black suits entered the diner, both looking around before pointing in the direction of the man sitting by himself in the corner. I continued watching them as I ate. The man at the table was wearing a sweatshirt with the hood pulled over his head, his hands folded neatly on the table in front of him, like a man deep in prayer. It was hard to make out his expression because his face was obscured not only by the hood, but also by the long dark hair sweeping across the bridge of his nose, past his chin. I swallowed, then took a sip of water as I watched the man in suit sit across from the hooded man. One of the suit guys was pointing a finger at the man, and then pointing the same finger up toward the ceiling. The hooded man continued sitting there, not moving a muscle. I finished off the rest of my food and finished off the water in a tidy little gulp before standing up and fishing my wallet out of my back pocket. I peeled a $10 bill off of the large bundle of ones and laid it on the counter. It was right as I had put my hat back on and turned to leave that the lights went out again. Only this time, they stayed out. That's about the same time that the waitress came crashing through the swinging door from the kitchen, screaming at the top of her lungs that she couldn't see. At first, I thought that she was having a very dramatic reaction to the lights being out, but then I realized she meant something far worse. Blood was running from underneath those thick black glasses, onto the grease-stained apron which hung from her neck. "Oh my God, help me," she screamed, running like a chicken with its head cut off. I was just about to lunge over the counter to help her when another scream shouted out from my right. This one was the young man that was sitting with his girlfriend. Only, he wasn't the one who was hurt. His girlfriend had collapsed onto the floor, violently convulsing on the ground as she started to foam at the mouth. "Holy shit, somebody call 911. The young man shouted. He was kneeling next to the girl, cradling her head in his arms. "Oh my God, shit," I shouted as I sprinted through the front door of the diner. As I was running, I noticed a man that had been sitting in the corner. His hood was off, and he was standing now, as the two suited men lay by his feet. There was something wrong with his face, but I couldn't tell exactly what it was in my hurry to get to my truck. My phone was in there, and I needed it if there was any hope of getting these people to help. I ran across the silent, empty street, and then slammed into my driver's side door. I frantically moved all of my papers and empty wrappers around before finding my phone next to the seat. I dialed 911 and looked back across the street at the diner. My mouth dropped open as the dispatcher's voice said hello into my ear. The small building was completely engulfed in flames. Smoke was rising into the night sky, obscuring the view of the stars. Against the backdrop of that orange fireball was the figure of a man, slowly walking toward me. I threw the phone into the truck and climbed into the driver's seat. I locked the doors and looked through the windshield. The man was gone. I pulled my keys out of my pocket with trembling hands and started the engine. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal and turned onto the road. That's when I saw him. He was standing in the middle of the street, perfectly still, watching my truck as I drove away. Only this time, I could see his face, and that is what still gives me nightmares to this day. His face was illuminated by the fire, and I could see that the skin was pale white, paler than snow, and the eyes were even whiter than that. There were no eyebrows, and the lips were turned upwards into an awful sneer, exposing the rows of long yellow teeth within its mouth. I escaped that day, but I know he is still out there. And it may be coming for you next. My name is Richard. I'm a truck driver bringing goods across the country and back for a decently good paycheck, but I doubt I'd be returning to that line of work anytime soon. My father was a trucker when I was young. He always told me it was a good job. You're out on the road with the fresh air, you are your own boss, and the pay's well. I thought it sounded great, so I wanted to take up trucking and delivering stuff when I got older. When I graduated high school, I did everything I needed. Passed the tests and everything, and soon enough I was out on the road. It was amazing for a year or two. I made good money and it was nice to be on the road, and even have my little room basically in my truck. But there's a reason I said was though. I doubt I'm ever driving another truck again after what happened to me one winter night. It was around 2 in the morning when it happened. I was driving down the nearly empty highway with a few cars passing by occasionally, when I saw what I thought looked like a giant skinny creature running through the trees in the woods to the right of my truck. I thought nothing of it because I was extremely tired after having driven a lot the past few days, and shrugged it off as my mind messing around with me. An hour later, around 3, there were no more cars, just me on the highway driving down. Moments later, I saw the same figure running through the trees again, and I started questioning if it was really in my head at this point. My thoughts were interrupted as a long, slender hand reached out of the trees in front of me, slamming into the front of my truck and stopping my truck immediately. The hand had long blood-stained claws, and I saw another hand creep over the barrier of the highway, as a pair of dead eyes stared through the trees. I attempted to get out of the car, but the creature flipped the truck over on its side, causing me to slam my head into the dash and go unconscious. My eyes opened a few moments later to see a giant creature coming out of the forest and climbing over the barrier. It was a very skinny pale white creature with extremely long and skinny limbs. I desperately tried to open the door and get out onto the side of the truck, but I passed out again. When I woke up, I was in the hospital and they told me I was found a few feet away from my truck laying on the highway with a bad head injury. Obviously, when I told them about what I saw, they brushed it off with excuses like, "It was all in your head," or "Your truck hit something and flipped." I didn't believe a word they said though. I know what I saw and I'm still mortified by it. What I saw on that road in the darkness, my truck was totaled, and there were no signs of anyone or anything near the accident site. I plan to quit my job as a trucker and move on to something else, but I'm horrified by what could happen if I were to drive again. I just won't ever feel safe on the road again after what I encountered. From a young age, I was told to never talk to strangers, and throughout my childhood I never did. However, in adult life things change. There's more reason to talk with people you don't know, especially when lonely. When I became a truck driver, the long and empty roads got the better of me, and I'd start giving lifts to hitchhikers who were going to the same place I was. It was a perfect solution for my loneliness, and often I would become friends with the people I gave lifts to. My job was perfect until that one November night. I had dropped off my cargo at the designated warehouse and was on my way back to the depot. It was going to be a long drive through the night. A few hours into the drive, I saw a man at the side of the road with a black bag and a plaque reading the same place I was going. Usually, past a certain time, I would ignore it and continue my journey, but something about this man made me feel like I owed it to him, and I could do with some company on the journey anyway. I pulled over, opened my window, and asked him where he was going, even though I had already read the sign. He just pointed at his plaque and looked up at me. Something about him made me uneasy, but it was too late now, and I told him to hop in. This was a huge mistake. The man climbed in and sat in the passenger seat. He was dressed completely in black, with a silver chain spilling out of the top pocket of his overcoat. At first, I was hesitant, but then I got myself together and shook his hand. It was cold, very cold. Not the kind of cold when it has been chilly outside, but the kind when someone has a fever. A wet, clammy, unnatural cold. I looked at his face. He looked like he was in his late 50s, with a gray beard and harsh eyes that put you in your place. I cleared my throat and introduced myself. He sent back a rough mumble that didn't sound like a name. All I said was pleased to meet you and got back onto the road. I decided it best not to try and talk too much to the man unless he talked first. He didn't look like the kind of guy that you'd want to say the wrong thing to. After a couple of minutes, I began to notice how he was constantly rummaging inside the bag. It was making a rather unnerving clinking sound of metal hitting other metal. After around an hour of driving, the man had not stopped rummaging inside the bag. I had also noticed that he had been staring at me for some time, which was creeping me out massively. It made my skin crawl. On most occasions, if I have a passenger who is not particularly communicative, I would put the radio on, but mine had stopped working last week, and I still needed to get it fixed. To stop him from staring at me, I asked him what's in the bag. I immediately regretted it. He looked right at me and said in a raspy voice, "Mind your own business." I was slightly shocked by this and tried to pass it off as a bit of a sarcastic joke, although I knew for sure it wasn't. Throughout the journey, the rummaging got louder and louder, and he started making stranger noises in an extremely low tone. I was so unsettled I began thinking of what to do. I could not go another 3 hours with this man in my truck. He was now clanging whatever was in his bag very hard. He then stopped and started scraping what sounded like a knife against something else. I had enough and pulled into the side of the road. I didn't want to confront this guy, but I asked him once more what's in the bag. Once again he responded with "Mind your own business." I nodded and said that we had a puncture on the back tire and asked him if he'd mind checking it out whilst I got the repair kit. He looked at me with a look of complete hatred, then got out of the truck and went round the back. I put my foot on the gas and drove. I saw him in my tail light staring after me with what looked like a smile spread across his face. His hands looked like they were covered in blood. I still see that image every time I close my eyes. I made it back to the depot, trying desperately to forget the man. Then I realized he had left his bag. I could not help but look at it, but I wish I hadn't. The bag was full of different metal objects, all of them looking like some kind of torture device. From knives and shackles to ropes and bars. I then realized they were all covered in blood. I don't know why I didn't turn the bag in to the police, but I thought that because it had my fingerprints on it, it would not end well for me. I took the bag home and did some more searching through it, and to my horror, at the bottom of the bag was a picture of my truck, a picture of the registration, and a picture of me holding the bag. I could hardly sleep, but in the end, I managed to get a few hours. I definitely couldn't go to the police now. It looked like the bag belonged to me, but I decided that I had to. I put the bag in a box and was about to walk out of the door when I noticed something. The picture of me holding the bag was nailed to the door with a note attached. All it read was "Mind your own business."